Game of Thrones Season 4 is over. It's been over for close to 2 weeks now, but we are finally getting started here at the Game of Thrones Season 4 Book Club on post-show recaps. I'm Josh Wigler. I'm here with Terri Schwartz, and we are not like Lady Stoneheart. We are not just bailing out on you. We are here. We are back. It took us a little while, but we're here. And yeah, very excited to be back here with the book club. Terri, how are you? It's been so long.
It's been so long, but like Lady Stoneheart, it was worth the wait and the payoff, hopefully, by the end of this episode. But we've missed all of you so much. Josh has been on exciting adventures in China. Yes. I was in Orlando for the Diagon Alley opening, realizing that magic is in fact real.
Yeah, you were at the Wizarding World of Harry Potter.
I was, and it was amazing. So if anyone cares about Harry Potter and who's listening here, it's really worth all the probably hundreds and thousands of dollars that you'll spend.
Yeah, I think that we've got some crossover here. You liked it? You were a fan of Diagon Alley?
I was a big fan. It's very immersive. I've never been someplace where I felt as in a world as I was there because I love Harry Potter, and that was my first love before Game of Thrones. And you know, imagine if you could walk into the Iron Throne room and feel like you were there and feel all that history. As many people have said, sets stop usually at like a couple feet up from where your head is on the wall. Maybe they get a ceiling, but most likely not. And this was very cool, feeling like you could do magic and hang out in a world that you love.
That's awesome. I want Game of Thrones world.
I absolutely want that. Well,
but I'm afraid if you walked in there, they would just kill you in like 5 minutes.
Probably. Maybe it'll be like one of those like the Halloween events that they do, where you go in and each person gets killed off as you walk through a house in haunted area that they could do with Game of Thrones.
Or it could be just like a place where you take your loved ones and then you betray them and leave them there.
I mean, there's this ABC show called The Quest that's coming out. That's a reality show where these Lord of the Rings producers constructed a fantasy realm. Like, they must have poured so much money into this, but it's supposed to be like a reality show, like Survivor, where people are competing, except it's in a fantasy world.
That's kind of awesome.
It's kind of awesome, or it's going to be terrible. But maybe your dream can come true.
How do I play The Quest? I have a good fantasy voice. Well, that's cool. We're getting wildly off topic. We should probably start talking about Game of Thrones. But yes, Terri, you were in Harry Potter World. I was in Hong Kong covering the Transformers premiere for MTV. I don't think that we are going to be doing a Transformers podcast here on post-show recap, so I'll give you the quick version. It's a Transformers movie. If you like a Transformers movie, you'll like this one. If you don't like Transformers movies, you won't like this one. It is exactly the same as the Transformers movies that have happened already. So there you go. That's my review of Transformers: Age of Extinction. And as a bunch of us were saying on that trip, that is a movie that is critic-proof. It does not matter what the reviewers say about that movie. It is going to make billions of dollars no matter what.
And they're not said nice things.
No, well, what are you going to do? So let's talk about something that we can say nice things about, and that is Game of Thrones Season 4, the finale, the whole season, the whole thing. We could talk about it really openly. Now, if this is your first time wandering into book club, first of all, I'm surprised you're still here because we haven't even been talking about Game of Thrones yet, and I think we're like 5 minutes into this thing. But this is a place where we talk about Game of Thrones from the perspective of people who have read the books. So this is spoiler territory. If you are not up and up on the books of Game of Thrones, you are about to get a whole mess of things spoiled for you. It is, we're not holding back. We are just going for it. So this is your only warning. If you are not into the spoiler thing, you should get out of here now. But if you are into the spoiler thing, then you are in the right place. That is where we are. We are talking about Game of Thrones Season 4 spoilers. And, I mean, a lot of the big ones are kind of out of the way. We've been waiting for a Storm of Swords to end so we can, I feel like that's always been considered the real climactic book in the series. And now we are in Feast Dance territory, which I think is very interesting because those books are the ones that kind of get ragged on a little bit. But I don't know. I feel like, for the most part, I feel like a lot of these big moments landed. I think that the Tywin stuff landed. The Lady Stoneheart thing didn't land. So I don't know, Terri, what did you think of the Season 4 finale? What did you think of the children? Were you a fan?
I was a fan. I honestly think that it's the best finale that they've ever done because
Yeah, that's pretty easy to say. That's
in previous
definitely true.
seasons it's always F9 that's the big climax, and then they just wrap stuff up in episode 10. And they really, like, even with Stannis, they saved all the big stuff for the finale. They gave us some extra minutes to deal with it, and I thought that everyone did an amazing job. I think that Maisie Williams probably gave my favorite performance of the season, and that was capped off with her scenes with the Hound and Brienne in this episode. But I think you're right. Like, the Tywin Tyrion stuff happened the way it needed to. I thought Conleth Hill was amazing in the finale. Varys turning around, hearing the bells tolling, and going, nope, getting on this boat and getting the F out of King's Landing. And yeah, I thought that across the board it was really solid.
So we are live here on Post-Show Recap. Some of you are with us now watching live. If you have questions for us that you want us to tackle in this podcast here, you can tweet them our way. I'm at Round Howard, like Ron Howard, but rounder. Terry is at Terri_Schwartz. So just send them our way. We'll talk about them. And if you listen to this in the archives after the fact, you can send questions to us for whatever the next book club we're going to do is, because this is not the end.
This is absolutely not the end.
This is absolutely not the end. We'll talk a little more about that towards the end of the podcast, but we are certainly by no means finished talking about Game of Thrones. But you can send us your questions at postshowrecaps.com/feedback. Just put in the subject line GOT Book Club or GOT Spoilers. That way we'll know it's for the book club, and we will always do our best to accommodate your questions in the podcast. We got a bunch of you guys who wrote in for this week, so we're going to be tackling all sorts of stuff there. I loved this episode. I thought The Children was great. I think Season 4 completely stuck the landing. Usually I feel like I want to take some time to step away from a season of TV before I decide whether or not it's the best season of the show to date. I think Season 4, the expectations from book readers, from people who hadn't read the books but have friends who've read the books and kept hyping them up, I think the expectation far and wide was Season 4 should be the best season of Game of Thrones, and I think it delivered. I think it absolutely is. I think the highs were so high. There were a few lows, but they were, few and far between. And overall, I think they really did it. But having said that, this is an episode that actually there's a lot different from the books in this one, and some rather significant ones. It kind of ranges from minor changes from the books to really big changes from the books. So I don't know, where should we start? It's really hard to figure out where to begin.
Let's start with Lady Stoneheart, because
we should.
I think we should get Lady Stoneheart out of the way on the top, and that's it. For those of you listening in the podcast, Josh has a sign behind them that says, "Why you want to break my Stoneheart?" So I think that's as good a place to start.
And I hope that earworms its way into your brain, just that melody. Why you wanna break my Stoneheart? So have fun with that. Have fun. Also, if you guys can't see this if you're listening to the audio, but Terry is wearing the coolest Game of Thrones shirt of all time. Show it off.
Schwartz.
House Schwartz.
Represent. I just got it yesterday. It makes me so happy.
With the Targaryen sigil on there, so way to go. Just further proof that Terry is the coolest person on the planet. Yeah,
HBO sent this to me, and I feel really flattered that they consider me to have Targaryen blood in my veins. I take that as a big sign of respect from them.
I have Craven blood in my veins.
But Lady Stoneheart, I had a heads up that it wasn't going to happen in the finale, but enough people were stoked about it that I honestly was like, maybe absolutely everyone involved in this show didn't know it was going to happen and it was going to be a surprise. It wasn't. It didn't happen. Josh, you've said before, it didn't happen then, it's not going to happen. And now Michelle Fairley has come out in an interview and pretty definitively said, I'm not coming back, my character's dead. That's the end. We're skipping that storyline. That's it. And
so I think we ought to recap a little bit. I think if you don't know who Lady Stoneheart is, that means you haven't read the books and somehow you're just in here and you're just destroying yourself, which is fine. We like it when you listen, so that's okay. It's your choice. Lady Stoneheart is the resurrected version of Catelyn Stark. She appears at the end of Book 3 of A Song of Ice and Fire, at the very end of Storm of Swords. She is such a weird character. It's such a left turn. It's something that a lot of people, when they were reading the books, really did not expect to see Catelyn Stark come back to life after she was very, very killed during the Red Wedding. And I think a question on a lot of people's minds as the show had progressed was, are we going to see Lady Stoneheart? season 3 ends and there's no Lady Stoneheart there. And I feel like the argument was, well, technically season 4 is where A Storm of Swords ends, so maybe they're holding it back for the end of season 4. And the closer and closer we gotten, the fewer and fewer clues that we were getting that this Catelyn Stark thing might still be in play. I was of the opinion that we're probably not going to get it. And then, there's the Lena Headey Instagram where she Instagrammed a picture of a heart made out of stones and said, "My stone heart." So she was really trolling the whole internet about Lady Stoneheart. It never happened. It didn't happen. We did not get Lady Stoneheart in the season 4 finale, and I think a lot of people were both surprised and very bummed out that it didn't happen. And then, just to really crush fans of Lady Stoneheart even further, there's this interview that Michelle Fairley gave to Entertainment Weekly, Michelle Fairley being the actress who plays Catelyn Stark, where she said, "Nope, Catelyn Stark is dead. They can't do everything from the books. Some things have to be skipped, and it looks like Lady Stoneheart is not going to be coming to Game of Thrones."
And I've been a person who has always been like, they're just saying that. They don't want us to know. If they do it, it's going to be a surprise. I finally it sunk in. They aren't going to do it. And I really like that twist. That's probably my favorite twist in the entire series. I love it. Obviously, we don't know where Lady Stoneheart's story is going. In the books, she meets up with Brienne, and then she also ends up meeting up with Jaime, and that's the last time we see those characters. So that implies that she has a significant role to play. But cutting her entirely from the show means that Lady Stoneheart probably ultimately isn't very important. And that, to me, is also a big bummer. And Josh, you had mentioned this. This is a case of, the show absolutely spoiling the books. Beyond the White Walker King, beyond seeing what happens, beyond the Children of the Forest being able to throw balls of fire like we see in this episode, Lady Stoneheart isn't important. And that bums me. I'm still hurt a bit from that.
Well, I'm of two minds. Either that's true, and the fact that Lady Stoneheart isn't going to show up on Game of Thrones could mean that she's not important in A Song of Ice and Fire. That David and Dan, the showrunners of Game of Thrones, are only picking the things from George's novels that ultimately matter, because they say that they want to do 7 seasons of this show, and if they're going to incorporate every single thing from the books onto the show, it's going to be like an 11-season show. So clearly they're cutting some things out, and maybe they're cutting out what they perceive or know to be the fluff, because they have reportedly talked with George Martin about everything that's coming up, so they would know. That's something that I expressed a couple weeks ago when Pip and Gren died on the Wall during Watches on the Wall. They are very much alive in the book still, and it left me wondering if they are going to be dead meat basically when Winds of Winter picks up again, and there's going to be presumably pandemonium on the Wall because of what happens to Jon at the end of Dance of Dragons. So it suggested to me that Pip and Gren are probably they might be dead very soon in the books, or at least they're not going to be that important. And you could definitely make that same argument for Lady Stoneheart. The fact that she's not going to show up on the show must mean that whatever role she's playing in the books can be solved through another, storyline. They can do something else that accomplishes the same thing that they can accomplish through Lady Stoneheart in the books. That's one read on it. And then I guess the other read is just that these are different stories. Game of Thrones has prioritized stuff that the books didn't prioritize. It has not prioritized things that the books have definitely prioritized. Prophecy hasn't been a very strong thing in the Game of Thrones show. We don't know very much about Rhaegar and Lyanna, yet we have to believe that if Rhaegar and Lyanna are Jon Snow's parents in the books, that they will be Jon Snow's parents on the show. So there's things that I don't know. There's enough differences in the way that the story has unfolded on the show, just in terms of what they've emphasized and how they've swerved in certain directions, that maybe it's just this is their version of the story and it's going to play out differently than the books. And maybe Stoneheart is monumentally important in the books, and it's just there's a way of doing that stuff on the show that doesn't require Stoneheart to be there. Like, I know that they've said, or somebody, I think it was Devin Faraci at badassdigest.com, who was writing about the lack of Lady Stoneheart, and he wrote something along the lines of, getting rid of Stoneheart kind of makes it a bigger deal when Jon comes back from the dead. If they want to do that, which everybody assumes is what's going to happen in Winds of Winter, that Jon is not really gone. So I see the reasons why they felt like they needed to do it. And I guess all of this is a very long-winded way of saying that I'm not as broken up about this as a lot of people are. I'm really not. I'm okay with it. I'm very okay with Lady Stoneheart not being involved. And Terri, I think you are the opposite. You are really you're not psyched about it.
Well, my thing, when if you go on Reddit or you go on these forums where people like us here in book club can talk about the show, having read the books, all people were talking about was Lady Stoneheart afterwards. And I thought that there was so much good stuff in the finale, and people were getting really hung up on it. And honestly, I was about as sick of talking about it as I was of people bringing up the rape. I'm like, okay,
right.
Whatever, let's get over it. The Michelle Fairley interview was just a couple of days ago. That rubbed me the wrong way, because I really do love that twist, but I get it, and I totally understand. You bring up the prophecy, and next season I believe we're getting the Maggie the Frog prophecy.
Seems like it, yeah.
What I've heard people talk about and sort of speculate with the show is that if they're going to do stuff with Rhaegar and Lyanna, whereas it works in the show or in the books as a little trail of breadcrumbs for for readers to figure it out, in the show it works a lot better to have that presented all in one concise moment. So if they're going to do it, maybe they're saving it until the end of the series instead of dotting it along from the beginning. I get it. I'm fine with it. And I try to be a big defender of the show because I do love it. But yeah, Lady Stoneheart Lady Stoneheart bumps me out if we don't get to see Rhaegar and Lyanna. That will be my one big complaint about the show. I think I've said that to you before.
Yes.
But you bring up the Jon fate. Did you see George R. R. Martin's appearance on the Game of Thrones season finale?
I haven't watched it yet, no.
It's amazing. First of all, if you guys don't know what Game of Thrones is, this one, Funny or Die producer had this hairdresser that just told the best stories and, recaps of TV episodes. And so they made the show around the hairdresser Jonathan recapping Game of Thrones while giving his client a haircut. And in the finale for season 4, George R. R. Martin comes on, and he basically does a Princess Bride type thing, where he's reading a story that the story is Jonathan being the hairdresser telling the recap, and there's a little kid in bed. And at the end, Jonathan, the hairdresser, dies. And Jonathan, just pointing that out again. And so the kid goes, "Why did you kill Jonathan? Jonathan's my favorite character." And George goes, "I didn't say he was dead." So I take that personally as a nod to the Jon Snow death at the end of Dance with Dragons. I might be reading too far into it, but also...
No, he's said that exact thing before. He's been asked before, how could you kill Jon Snow? And he's been like, did I say he was dead?
Have a better poker face, George R. R. Martin. But
right, exactly.
Yeah, I like that reading of it, that the Jon Snow... Maybe you only get one resurrection like this on Game of Thrones, and maybe they're saving Beric Dondarrion or Melisandre for that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other argument, though, is that, Beric Dondarrion did come back. They've done that before, so it's not like if Jon comes back from the dead, he's going to be the only one who that's worked with. So that kind of undercuts the lack of Catelyn Stark, Lady Stoneheart argument just a little bit. I think the other thing here is I've seen some people talking about how the way that Michelle Fairley phrases things in that EW interview, first of all, leaves it a little bit ambiguous, where she says the character is dead, she's dead. If she's talking about Catelyn Stark, that's still accurate if Lady Stoneheart comes back. So maybe there's a reading of what Michelle Fairley was saying that leaves it a little open that Stoneheart could return. I don't know. I tend to think that what she was saying was pretty straightforward. I'm kind of buying that Stoneheart is out of the picture. But then, there's also the fact that she's just an actor. Actors don't know everything that the writers are planning. Not only that, she's an actor who's been off the show for a full season, who really probably doesn't know what the writers are planning. You would think that she would know if she was going to be coming back, though. But then the other thing about Stoneheart that kind of, for me, doesn't necessarily crush hope that Stoneheart could come back. So let's say the writers are planning to surprise us with Lady Stoneheart. Let's say Brienne and Podrick run into her at some point in the middle of Season 5, and everybody's just like, whoa, crap, I can't believe that. That's so crazy. Well, the fact that they didn't have her at the end of Season 4, and this is why I was saying now or never, is because so many people now know about Lady Stoneheart. And I'm not just talking about book readers. I'm talking about people who only watch the show. Please don't spoil him anything on anything else, but Rob knows what Lady Stoneheart is at this point. You know, Rob Sesternino has been spoiled on this. Everybody knows who Lady Stoneheart is now. So if she pops up on the show down the line, it's just going to be like, oh yeah, well, I guess they finally decided to do that thing that I've known about for a while. So if they are planning to save it for season 5, then by pushing it off, they've, I don't know, like they've undercut their own big surprise. So I feel like it now adds absolutely nothing to bring Lady Stoneheart into the mix at this point. I think that's one of the big reasons why I was saying it's now or never. It's got to be the season 4 finale, or they can't do it.
I definitely feel like that time has passed. And so with it, let us put an end to the Lady Stoneheart discussion. Lady Stoneheart, we love you. We miss you. Have a great undead afterlife in Westworld. Let's move on. My favorite deviation from in the finale is having Brienne and the Hound and Arya and Pod meet up. Yes. I loved that. I thought that it was amazing. I thought that was a scene that the director Alex Graves said was his favorite scene to shoot ever. That was what Gwendolyn Christie teased when she said she was going to bite off someone's ear this season. That fight is like probably my favorite fight in the entire show. And I thought that they nailed every single part of that storyline in this finale.
Yeah, again, another big change from the books is, you know, Brienne and the Hound do not intersect, or at least not as obviously as this. There are theories that they do meet on the Quiet Isle in A Feast for Crows, but this is a very different encounter than we see in the books. It was crazy. It was awesome. I thought it was amazing. And we'd been talking all season long on Book Club about how are they gonna split Arya and the Hound up? What's gonna happen to the Hound? And we thought when he got bit by the biter, we thought that was gonna be it, that he was gonna have some infection, and obviously he was doing fine. He just needed to be stitched up. So it was like, what are they gonna do? And then the frickin' Brienne bites his ear off and throws him off a cliff.
Over a cliff. Oh man, I watched that like. For the finales and for the big episodes, I try and get as many non-book reader friends of mine to come over because I just love seeing their reactions, and people are losing their minds. My book reader friends and my non-book reader friends losing their minds when they throw him over. And you think it's going to be like a huge thing, but then he just tumbles down. Oh man, so I'm of the theory that that the Hound is still alive and on the Quiet Isle. Maybe not the Hound, but Sandor Clegane is still alive. This is another storyline, though, where they've come out and said, this is the end of the Hound's journey. The Hound is dead. The storyline is supposed to end there. And again, you can read...
Now, who has said that? Because I'm blanking a little bit on who said that.
Alex Graves said that pretty definitively.
The director of the episode.
Yeah, he said that he shot this, and this is the end of the Hound story, and that's what he was told, and that the point is not that the Hound dies, but that Arya leaves him, and she continues on her journey. But he gave a couple of interviews where, again, like with Michelle Fairley thing, you can look into how he phrased things, and you can look into that, but he essentially says, that's it with the Hound. We aren't going to be revisiting him.
Right. Which I'm okay with, because I really hope that in the books, even if he is alive on the Quiet Isle, I hope that's his ending. I don't think we need to see the Hound ever again. I think that he's a really fantastic character, represents a lot of the things that make this story so good. But there's so many characters in the mix and so many storylines up in the air that you do have to start trimming the fat eventually as you get on the other side of the mountain. You need to start figuring out what's worth keeping and what you are able to kind of consider finished, what's complete. And I feel like the Hound's arc is very complete if he is on the Quiet Isle and is kind of atoning for a life of sin. And I know that there are a lot of people that really hope that he comes back into the mix so he can, you know, battle Sir Robert Strong, and they can kind of have their epic confrontation and sort of settle their differences and settle their beef. But you know what? It's life. You don't always settle your differences. Things, you know, go unresolved very often, and I feel like I'm totally okay. What's that?
Especially in Game of Thrones, things.
Especially in Game of Thrones, yeah. Game of Thrones is very true to life in that way, where they'll drop things. You know, they won't. You know, Robb Stark's entire arc is an arc unfulfilled. You know, and that's the case for a lot of people. It's just the way that life plays out. So if there's no epic confrontation between the Hound and the Mountain later on in the books, I'm really totally 100% okay with that. And if the Hound doesn't rear his head again on the show and they kind of just leave him as a question mark, sort of broken and battered in the middle of the Riverlands just on his own, you know what? That's powerful. I think that's great, and especially with how good Rory McCann was as the Hound, especially this season, but even season 3 he was very good, and he I think in season 1 took a little while to find his character. I don't think that Rory McCann as the Hound really popped for me until season 2.
Yeah.
I think was really where he started taking off as kind of a big breakout character on the show, and this season he was just so magnificent that to leave him here just hanging there, kind of to be this sort of footnote on this chapter of Arya's life, I think is awesome and is very in line with what we've gotten from Arya's storyline to date. She has these teachers, she leaves them, she moves on. And for the Hound to kind of end here, I would be totally fine with. I don't know that it's as definitive as Alex Graves says. I would subscribe to the Michelle Fairley thing where she's an actor. She doesn't know what the writers are planning. He's a director. He probably knows more than Michelle Fairley does, but it's a David and Dan thing. So.
No. Alex Graves is a person with secrets. He is the one who, in speaking with the actors, he's the one that they go to try and get information about what's coming. He knows a lot about what's planned down the road.
Okay.
While some like Neil Marshall, who did like the Battle at the Wall,
yeah,
and
he's a hired gun.
Don't know that much. Alex Graves is definitely in the know about a lot of stuff that they're planning. So I would guess that he knew.
So then maybe the Hound is gone, and I'm great with that if that's the case.
I think that we've skipped over the most important thing. As a Sansa shipper, maybe closeted sometimes because people really judge you when you say that you love Sansa and the Hound. I love the fact that when he's prodding her, he goes, "I should have raped your sister and would have had one happy moment in my entire life." Again, horrible out of context. But I love that moment because I was like, oh, they're finally paying off the fact that he really did love her and all this stuff. And something that Alex Graves said about this scene between the Hound and Arya is even though he's saying all these horrible things to her, how Alex told Rory to act the scene is just say, you're saying these things, but what you're really saying is, I love you. I'm in love with you. I love you. I think you're like amazing and I love you. Please kill me. And
right.
I love that reading of that scene and just the way that these two kids have affected this guy, this super messed up, troubled guy. I really loved that element of the end of his journey, if this is the end, which we think it is.
Yeah, and I also love, I don't know, for me it does feel like resolution if this is just where you leave the Hound. That the Hound he's done as much good as he possibly can after kind of a life of being just a rotten bastard, killing children and doing whatever Joffrey said. He tries to save Sansa at certain points. He has this road trip with Arya where he's looking out for her and sort of starting to care about another human being. But in the end, it's not enough. This guy was such a scoundrel for so long that this is where we leave you. And there's no mercy for a man like you. And I think that there's something kind of really awesome about that, which is it's a sad ending for the Hound, but I think there's something really powerful about that too. So again, yeah, I'm all aboard if this is the end of the Hound. I'm sad to lose him, but I'm all aboard if it's the end.
I'm gonna dip a little bit into some season 5 stuff. I'm assuming that if people are watching this and are here for book club and spoilers and discussion, you're okay with us talking about future seasons. If not, go tune your ears out or whatever for a little bit. But a lot of news has broken in the past couple weeks since the show ended. And the one thing that I saw is that, I'm blanking on his name, but the actor who plays Jaqen Hagar is supposed to come back and have a role next season.
Yes.
And I think it's going to be, if what is speculated from that news ends up being true, which is that he might be the old man who...
The kindly man.
Yeah, the kindly man who runs the House of Black and White, then it could be Jaqen instead of him, which I think it might be a good call, especially since people all season have been going, when are we going to get Jaqen back? When are we going to get Jaqen back? Tom Washka?
I don't know. It's German. I can't pronounce
something. And I think that sort of looking at the Hound and looking at all these influences on Arya throughout her life, I think if they do bring Jaqen back, it'll be a really interesting way to just track her as a character, because we've seen her absorb so much of the Hound this season, down to just leaving him to die, even though he taught her about mercy. She leaves him to die. I think that having her spend a whole season under Jaqen's tutelage will be really interesting and exciting for her character.
Yeah, I guess the one thing that I don't love about that is because I love the thing about Arya being that everybody leaves her, or she leaves everybody. Like, no one comes back. Things change for her constantly, and there's no such thing as home or country for her ever again, basically from the moment she runs away from Syrio Forel. Basically from the moment she leaves Winterfell. So I love that about Arya, and that's always been one of my favorite things about her. And so I like the idea of the kindly man because he is, somebody who serves a new purpose. It's a new character. I love the many, many teachers of Arya Stark. That being said, I also love Jaqen H'ghar, and I'm totally down to have more Jaqen H'ghar back. But it's also not out of the question that he's going to be in Old Town at the Citadel.
That's what I was going to say as well. That could be, like, obviously Jon hasn't had his Lord Commander stuff happen yet, but I'm guessing that will probably happen early to the middle of next season. And he'll probably send Sam away at some point in the season, which means Sam would get to Old Town. And you're right, I was thinking about that as well. If it doesn't end up being the Bravo storyline, it's probably going to be Old Town, which I would be happy with because we're still sort of waiting to see what the greater purpose of Jaqen being in Old Town is.
Right. So yeah, I think that's a possibility. But if gun to my head, how are we going to be getting Jaqen H'ghar next season if he's coming back? It's going to be as the kindly man. I think they're going to replace the kindly man with that, which is I'm really good with Game of Thrones streamlining, especially as we're getting closer and closer. Like I'm fine with that. So if that's what they want to do, totally good with that. Before we leave the Arya stuff, I guess we should talk about Brienne and Podrick and what the hell are they going to do next season?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question. I've heard, like, in the show, she just wanders for a bit. And I guess she still hasn't found Sansa. She still could look for Sansa, and maybe she's going to head north to the Wall or something. Maybe she's going to end up having more of a storyline that intersects with Stannis and Ramsay eventually. I'm not entirely sure. But I have heard things about Jaime and how his storyline is going to work, and how instead of going west and north or however he would get to the Riverlands from King's Landing, he's going to, from what I've heard, it's not confirmed, he's going to be the connective tissue to Dorne, and that he's going to go to Dorne with Bronn and be there to see Myrcella. And I think that, again, if what I'm hearing is true, I think that the Dorne storyline is going to change a lot in a very, very streamlined way that I'm okay with, but I've heard people be really against. And if you're a book purist, you're going to be really ticked off if that ends up.
Yeah, I don't know where I've heard. I feel like I read those rumors as well. Those rumors are out there that Jaime's storyline is going to Dorne next season. I'm not really sure where people are getting that from, but that's a thing that could possibly happen. And I would, I'm up for some Dorne action, and I feel like having somebody that we know go to Dorne is a good thing. And there's like Eris Oakheart is there in the books, but you don't really give a crap about him. And I think one of the big complaints about Feast and I guess not so much Dance, but mostly Feast being the Dorne storylines and the Iron Island storyline is you don't really care about anybody there. They're asking you to care about all of these new characters that you haven't seen much of anything of basically ever. I mean, some on the Iron Islands, but really no one in Dorne. So I feel like you probably do need to have somebody you're familiar with in Dorne. So Jaime would be good. I think that would work.
The rumors came out because they're recasting Myrcella. It hasn't been officially announced yet, but that it's either going to be Amy Richardson, I believe her name is, or they're looking at this other actress to have her be older, and there were actresses reading scenes where Myrcella is talking to Jaime about how she loves Trystane, who we know they're apparently casting for next season, and how she wants to get married to him really fast because it's like Romeo and Juliet, they're so in love. So that could be interesting, and again, a big deviation. I almost feel like if that's the route they're going with Dorne, and I think that we're going to get Prince Doran wanting to get revenge and wanting to bring Dany back to the throne still, even with Jaime there. I think they're probably going to do away with like Eris Oakheart and the Aryan story and some of those other ones. I could see them just like cutting out all the fat that we know and coming up with their own thing to make everything tie back together. I think if season 4, I agree, is one of the best, is the best season of the show, I think 5 is going to be really hard for book readers to stomach because we don't have Winds of Winter yet. We might not get it before then, and there are going to be a lot of changes because this is when the books really just spread out into a big puddle story that's going to be really hard to gather up and keep.
Crazy, 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 crazy. That would be nuts.
Josh, I want to talk about Jojen. And Jojen,
yeah, who doesn't want to talk about Jojen?
You told me about Jojen paste, and not that long after, I learned about the fate of Jojen on the show, and
That he becomes Jojen paste.
I have been waiting to talk about this with you for what feels like a lifetime. Not that long. This, to me, some people viewed Jojen's death as being like, oh, well, Jojen paste isn't a thing. For me, I'm like, no. Bran eats Jojen in the books, and Jojen is super dead, and they aren't going to do that on the show because that might be a line even they can't cross. Or maybe he will eat Jojen paste with the dead body of Jojen next season. But that is confirmed to me now.
You think Jojen paste is confirmed?
Yes, and I'm freaking out about it.
I was really surprised with the way that they did everything with Jojen. They just brutally murdered him. This poor guy, he's so sick. He's already very ill. That's a thing in the books that he's dying in the books. Whether or not he's dead yet in the books, he's certainly not doing well. The far north is not agreeing with him. But so they have that happening, and then he gets stabbed like a million times in the chest by the skeletons. Then he gets stabbed in the throat by his sister, and then he blows up. How many times can you kill the guy?
They really don't want you to think that Jojen is coming back, but at least this means for certain that he won't come back as a wight. Maybe that's the purpose.
Right. Yeah, that was, I guess that's...
I like sort of the capstone on his story, though, with the three-eyed raven or blood raven or whatever you would like to call him here in book club, with him saying Jojen knew before he left that he was going to die here, which has been another theory about Jojen, and I liked that confirmation that he did know he was going to his death, even though he was saying that, he actually did know that was how his life was going to end and that this cause was greater for him than his own life.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting, and I'm interested to see what they do with Mira next season without Jojen being in the mix. She's already been a character that hasn't suffered, that hasn't benefited much. She's suffered from the translation from books to the TV show, I think. I don't think that she's a particularly exciting character on the show. Jojen was infinitely more exciting on the show, I thought.
But even then, I don't think that they did nearly as much as they could have with Thomas Brodie Sangster this season that actually plays Jojen. I feel like by the time Jojen dies, you're like, oh, this is surprising, but you don't care about either of those characters like maybe you did last season. They were always just the people following Bran.
Right.
And so that I really like those characters in the book. I know other people who did not like those characters in the book, but I was a little disappointed with how they were handled. I know we dealt with this with Ygritte, where we felt like they should have done more with her. If there had been more time, I wish we could have done more with Jojen and Mira.
Yeah. Well, we're at the point, we've talked about this with Sansa and Littlefinger, where we're sort of at the end of the rope with Sansa. I mean, there's still a little more to do, but it's not necessarily, big stuff. It's just kind of little business. It's the type of stuff where you can easily see how they catch up to Sansa in 2 episodes of season 5. And now we're basically in the same exact spot with Bran. Who knows what the heck they're going to do with Bran in season 5? It's going to be all new stuff. A lot of people speculate that we'll be seeing things like Maggie the Frog, maybe the Tower of Joy, maybe the Tourney at Harrenhal through Bran's eyes. Maybe that's going to be the way that we see some of this prophecy stuff play out. I don't know. I'm really curious to see how they use Bran in season 5, because he's a complete mystery. We're basically caught up.
Yeah. I think that this is, for me, where Bran's storyline gets really interesting. But David and Dan have said so often, they aren't going to do flashbacks with the show, and I don't know if that means divisions count as flashbacks. But I sort of get the sense that we won't see those. I think we're going to see Maggie the Frog, but I like the theory that and speculation that I've heard that maybe next season is going to open up with the Maggie the Frog scene, and then it's going to be Cersei waking up, and she's going to wake up, and the bells are going to be tolling, and Tywin is dead, and there's going to be all this. I like that theory. But I don't know if they're going to do those visions with Bran or how they're going to play out. When I talked to Isaac Hempstead Wright before the premiere, I brought up
so casual.
What a casual
name drop.
But I asked him, like, I was talking about these scenes, and I brought up the scene where Ned is in front of the werewood tree, like Bran is looking through and he sees Ned in front of the werewood tree, sort of acknowledging, like, please let them grow up as brothers, referring to Robb and Jon. What he told me is they shot that scene in the original pilot that they used. So I wonder if they're going to reuse footage like that for flashbacks, even if we don't see some of the bigger things like the Tower of Joy or the tree at Harrenhal. But I also get the sense we already started getting some weird stuff with the Children of the Forest in the finale. Maybe we're going to get deep into their mythology next season. Maybe we're going to really find out a lot about who and what they are and who this three-eyed raven is. And that's super going to be like moving way beyond what we know in the books. But it's season 5, and they're only supposed to be season 7. They're going to have to start giving some answers. So I feel like that could be what Bran's storyline is.
Yeah, I don't think that we can stress this enough. We are in the danger zone. You know, we are at the point where certain characters are still on pace for what is in the books. Like, there's plenty to do with Jon. There's enough to do with Dany. There's a ton to do with Tyrion. But characters like Sansa and Bran are basically at the end of their ropes where they are in the books. And they can't just not be in the season. You know, you can't do what George R. R. Martin did in A Feast for Crows and A Dance of Dragons. You can't just have one season with all of, you know, the characters south of the Riverlands and one season with everybody north of the Riverlands. It's not going to work like that. There's contracts. There's people involved. You know, real life people who bring this show to life. So they have to include everybody, and that's going to mean either inventing things completely from their own imaginations, where they, you know, them hypothesizing where Bran will go and where Sansa will go, with, you know, just completely their, you know, sort of, I hesitate to call it fan fiction, but basically their versions of how the story that George R. R. Martin is writing should play out. Or they're outright going to be spoiling things that has not been published in the books, assuming Winds of Winter isn't out by the time that Season 5 hits. So it's interesting. It's very, very, very interesting. And Bran and Sansa, for me, are the two that you can really talk about that stuff with. I don't want to leave the Bran storyline completely, just because I want to get your take on what did you think of the three-eyed raven and how they did that. Did you like that?
Yeah. I mean, that played out the way that I imagined it in the book.
I wanted him to be so much more high fantasy than he was, though. Like, I wanted him to have twigs in his face. I wanted him to have, like, the red eye. I said he was, like, in the books I got this sense he was, like, in the tree, like the tree had grown around him, basically. What I really liked of the production value in this episode and in this scene is, to me, the throne he was sitting on looked a lot like the Iron Throne. Right. And so I liked the parallel of, like, maybe there is more than Mance Rayder, more than the White Walkers. Maybe there is this creature, a Targaryen, if what is rumored is actually true, right. In the north, waiting for Bran Stark and waiting for his moment to come. I wasn't disappointed with that. I just wanted him to be much cooler than he was. He was just kind of like
super cool next season. I feel like this episode is more a therapy session than book club. It's okay. It's okay. It's all going to be okay.
I know. Well, as I mentioned in I think it was the last book club, or maybe it was the one before that, where I said that the Bran chapter where he meets Bloodraven is my favorite chapter in the books by far and away. So this is one where I'm not very protective of a lot of stuff. I'm open to the show changing things up and doing things differently from the books, because it's a show and it's got to be its own thing. But this was one where I was really holding on to it, and I really wanted it to play out exactly like it did in my head. And there was some stuff in there that was really close. My favorite, the reason the chapter is my favorite chapter is just like how stressful it is and how terrifying it is and how it plays out like a horror movie when when the whites are kind of popping up all around them, and there's the moment where Bran sees one that's like crawling towards him, and it seems like it's going to open up his guts. Like, that's the thing that he's thinking. Like, you get that from his perspective. And you did have like this one white that was like one of those skeleton things that was crawling up to him, and its hands were like going to his stomach, and I was like, holy crap, they're really adapting it. So I wasn't completely disappointed by this scene. And it certainly, for a show, played out really cool, and I liked, sort of the Jason and the Argonauts skeletons. I thought that was a fun little fantasy touch. I think maybe the normies, the casuals, maybe were really thrown off by this scene because it's so high fantasy. And this is not a show that does high fantasy too often, so I could see how some people were maybe like, whoa, what's going on here?
Yeah, I feel like I did hear a couple people just saying, like, they look stupid and everything, but this was our high fantasy episode, and especially with Danny and the Dragons. Granted, only 2 of 3 dragons, that third being significant for later.
Right.
When Danny, I don't think we need to touch on like the Danny and John stuff too much, because that felt to me very similar to what happened in the books.
Yeah, straightforward.
But when Danny goes and locks up the dragons, all I could think about is Quentin. Like, when we get back here, it's going to be really sad if we even get Quentin in the show.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was all I was thinking throughout that entire scene. It wasn't even emotional for me because I was so stressed out thinking about what happens later in the books.
Yeah, I did enjoy that story. I enjoyed Danny locking the dragons up. I think it was smart to shift that to season 4 rather than holding off for season 5 to do that. I think that, especially thematically with the whole, basically this past 2 seasons, her whole arc being Breaker of Chains and then ending it with her enslaving her children, basically, I thought was really powerful. And then with John, yeah, it was very straightforward, I thought, everything that they did there. The only thing I guess we can, and also I loved it, and I think the way that they launched the finale with the Stannis thing, I think for me really does actually justify the way that they ended Watchers on the Wall. I think that was a really cool payoff for the way that they closed out that episode. So I'm totally good with that now.
And Stannis looked so cool. Like,
yeah,
they were the coolest dudes in school. They were amazing. That made me really happy.
So I'm really pumped up for Stannis and Jon next season. I'm really pumped up for Melisandre. They are obviously hyping that up with the way that she looks at Jon through the fire. I'm curious as to how they're going to pace Jon's story going forward. Clearly, he's going to become Lord Commander. That didn't happen here, so that's some leftover business from A Storm of Swords that has to get answered in Season 5, which is fine by me. I think that's a better way to start a season for Jon than to end this one. I think to end Season 4 with Jon burying or burning Ygritte, I think was a better way to, kind of resolve his story from the past 2 seasons. But I wonder how long it's going to take for him to become Lord Commander. I wonder if it's going to be done like within the first 2 episodes, or if it's going to be like, I think that there's something to be said for there being almost a little bit of a political situation up on the wall where they're stretching it out. It's almost like a bit of an election. I always find that fun. I'm finally caught up on House of Cards. I love that show. So I'm very interested to see like those kinds of politics on TV. King's Landing has obviously done all of that stuff really well. I'm always interested when these genre shows kind of play with real world tropes. Like Battlestar Galactica has some really fun stuff with elections and everything like that. So I kind of hope we see some election action at the Wall where there's like some campaigning on Sam's part to get Jon to be Lord Commander, because I think it's only a chapter or 2 in A Storm of Swords at the end where Sam is going around and really almost stuffing the ballot for Jon. But I think that potentially could be a fun way to play out over a larger portion of Season 5. Or the other way to go is to get Jon to be Lord Commander basically right away and to have him filled with knives by the end of the season.
I don't think it's going to be right away because we need to establish this sort of strange relationship between Stannis and Jon. They need to really figure out each other. Because Jon is not his father or,
right.
known father. I've sort of been looking, if this season was the really action-packed season, which I think it was, I think next season is going to be very political because we have Dany having to be a Marine and work with the politics of Marine and learn that city because she doesn't know it. We have King's Landing. We're going to see the battle between Marjorie and Cersei, and I think that's going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
We have Dorne being introduced as a major player, and obviously Prince Doran has his plan and his politics that he's playing. And I really like the idea of the Wall being another place. And then we have the Vale with Littlefinger. So I think that next season is going to be very political, and that it's going to be a huge missed opportunity for them to not play into that and show Jon being more of a politician than just a warrior or leader.
Well, yeah, even as, a quote-unquote elected official, a big part of Jon's story from that moment onward is integrating the wildlings with everybody, on the wall and south of the wall. So no matter what, it's going to get political and it's going to be cool. I just think that some sort of like election cycle would be very fun. All right, we're going a little long, and I'm great with that. And I think that we've been gone for so long, so why not give it a little extra juice? But we should start talking about the Tyrion stuff.
There were a lot of big changes in King's Landing. Not even with Tyrion, but a lot with Jaime and Cersei. Like starting with Cersei flat out telling Tywin, "Hey, everything you heard about Jaime and me was true." Didn't end up mattering that much because obviously he dies not that long after. But I think that makes a big change for Cersei and Jaime.
I think that there's stuff to be talked about in terms of the sibling relationships, because I think the only one that is not changed from the books is Tyrion and Cersei. Tyrion is still Cersei's number one target. She goes to sleep at night at the end of season 4 basically very content because she knows that Tyrion's going to be executed in the morning, and Tyrion runs off. So that dynamic is probably going to be in place for season 5. She's still going to be very paranoid about Tyrion and everything. But the Jaime-Cersei relationship is different because Tyrion doesn't tell him anything about like, oh, well, Cersei's been cheating on you, which we haven't even seen much of anything on the show, really.
Kettle blacks. I mean, I think Loras is the one person, or Lancel was the one person who she ever actually cheated on him with. And then
that's really it. And then so that's not something that's playing out in Jaime's mind, which is obviously a big.
Jaime still made the choice, like with Cersei saying everything we ever wanted is ours. We can be together. We can be together in public. We can raise our children. You can be like whatever, my king regent or whatever prince, whatever. He still chooses Tyrion over her. To me, I've liked that the characters have had to make that choice, be it with Bran or Arya or Sansa, and now with Jaime. I'm glad that they've had to make the choice and not have their surroundings choose for them. But to me, what's been brought up a lot, and I do see being problematic, is the way that Tyrion and Jaime's relationship.
Right.
Like I'm okay.
Right. So in the books they end in such an antagonistic way where Jaime tells Tyrion about Tysha and how Tysha wasn't a whore and Tysha actually loved him, and that like kills Tyrion. That's really what drives him to kill Shay and Tywin. That doesn't exist at all in the books. So there's Tywin has nothing but good feelings towards Jaime on the show right now, and Jaime feels like he's done the right thing because Tywin hasn't turned around and lied to Jaime and said, I killed your son. I killed Joffrey. So that didn't happen. And yeah, I mean that coming at it from the book reading perspective, that moment plays out softer on the show because there isn't like that venomous thing. But you could kind of see that coming because they didn't really bring it up at all, basically since the Never Have I Ever game back in season 1. I think that the Orson Lannister scene from The Mountain and the Viper, that could have been the opportunity to bring Tysha back up if they were going to do it in the finale. So the fact that they hadn't really been building back up to it at all was a pretty clear signal to me that they weren't going to do it, and they're getting rid of it. And I guess this is another one of those Lady Stoneheart situations, one of those Pippin Gren situations where the animosity between Jaime and Tyrion must not be that important in the books, or the show is going to find some way to kind of get around that and find other ways to make it important.
I think that when next season starts, Jaime might be pretty ticked off that he set his brother free and then his brother killed their father, and like he considers that a huge mistake and a betrayal. I think that could be how they get around it. To me, the Lady Stoneheart of it is that Tysha isn't going to be important. She probably won't pop back up in the way that we hope and speculate she will in later Game of Thrones novels. And also,
do you think that that's going to happen in the books? You think Tysha's like literally going to resurface in Tyrion's life?
I mean, there are theories that like she already has. Well, basically every single woman that he meets, there's a theory that that's Tysha. No, that's Tysha.
Right.
I think that he's where do whores go? He's looking for her in his own way. I think that it would make sense for him to find her, even if it's as a broken woman, or he finds out that she committed suicide or something just really tragic to nail that home. But I think that just means like next season won't be the Where Do Whores Go season like Dance with Dragons was the Where Do Whores Go book.
Right.
And I get that they changed Shay a lot in the show, and I think Shay was supposed to be his true love that just didn't happen. And I think that to have Taisha be a part of the story at the end of that episode would have undermined his pain in killing Shay. So I'm okay with that, but
I'm good with it. I'm good with the only thing I will miss from this situation is Wherever Whores Go. I was sad that those weren't Tywin's, some of his final words. I thought that would have been great. I also missed that you didn't really get like a plop of poop after Tywin gets shot. Poop humor is my thing. If you want the key to Wigler's heart, give me a good poop joke. That'll win me over every day.
That line, and in the end, where Tywin Lannister did not shit gold, is my favorite line of this entire series. And it was funny just talking about that and having it come up and talking about the finale with one of the publicists at HBO. She goes, "Is there a line about pooping in the books? Because people keep asking me about it." And I was like, well, let me tell you. So, yeah, I can understand why they didn't incorporate that in some way. Maybe they'll include it next season. Like, someone will make an offhand joke about Tywin being dead and, like, he didn't shit gold in the end. But
right. It's fine. Listen, I'm not crying over here. I'm okay with it. I would have liked to have seen it. I would have liked Wherever Whores Go so that we could get some Tyrion Where Do Whores Go next season. I mean, he still can say it. There's no reason he can't say it.
Varys very well could know these things.
Well, let's talk about Varys. Varys leaving with Tyrion is a huge change. Because Varys, after he frees Tyrion, is basically completely missing from the picture until he shows up at the end of Dance and kills Kevin Lannister. So I am curious about how. I mean, it works. The fact that Varys is out of the picture in King's Landing, that's faithful to the books. But Varys going off with Tyrion, I wonder how long they'll play that for. We have someone in the chat room who's watching live. Ryan asks, is Varys a possible replacement for Penny, who is the other young woman who Tyrion meets on the road when he goes over to Essos? I don't think so. I think that Varys still has too much business to attend to in King's Landing. I think that he has to come back into the mix in some way. He's tied up to the young Griff story in a way that he needs to be more important than just being a bystander on Tyrion's journey. So I think we're going to get Varys in a different way than that. But I'm kind of curious as to how they're going to play it now that Varys has left King's Landing with Tyrion.
I could see Varys directing the journey to young Griff. I could see him playing that role, and then, I don't expect him to end up in Meereen or outside of Meereen like Tyrion is, but I could see him having a hand in that. I'm curious, though, do you think that they're going to have Kevin Lannister be the Hand of the King next season?
He's established on the show. They could bring him back into the mix.
All you need is a previously on Game of Thrones and show him again. And
yeah, they could bring him in as early as episode 1 of season 5. Even episode 2 would be fine. I think that they can bring Kevin Lannister back. Or they can just give it to Mace Tyrell, I guess.
Yeah, I hope that they bring back Kevin Lannister instead of just making use with what they have, because I think that Mace has another role to play, and I'm really excited. Like, I wasn't crazy about the Faith storyline in the books, but I think it's going to be so interesting in the show, and really, everyone we know pretty much in King's Landing is going to be gone, except for Cersei and Marjorie, and seeing a real clash of wills between them, and see that city become a different political landscape than we've ever seen before. I think it's going to be great to play out.
Cool. We've got a couple of questions from people who wrote into us over the past week. One is from Janice, who asks, why wasn't the Mountain screaming? He just looked like he was passed out. He didn't even flinch when Qyburn put the tube in his arm to drain his blood. They should have done the scene outside the room that he was in and had him screaming in the background. In the books, you can hear it all over King's Landing. How hard would it have been to show that? It would have given people more satisfaction after seeing him kill Oberyn in the brutal fashion that he did. Did you have any complaints about how the Mountain and Maester Qyburn turned out? The one thing I loved about this scene, and even Rob loved this on the podcast that we did right after the show, was how Cersei is like, will it weaken him? And Qyburn's like, oh no.
She's like, all right, go for it.
It won't weaken him.
I think there's plenty of opportunity next season to do the screening and set it up for a big Robert Strong reveal.
Yeah.
I don't think that we need it at this point because Qyburn hasn't started doing any of his, experiments on the Mountain. So I think that could be something we get next season, and just like scenes of Cersei being satisfied with the screaming in the background, or even just like conversations people are having to hear the screaming. If they don't do it at all, that will be disappointing, but that seems that would be surprising for them to leave out.
Yeah. Our Philly in the chat room, going back to Varys really quickly, asks, will we see Varys reconnect with Illyrio and affirm his support of Dany openly? Do you think that we get Illyrio next season?
Yeah, I bet that's because I bet that they'll change Tyrion's journey even if he hits the same major points, and I could see them hitting Pentos first and then continuing on the journey, and maybe even Varys stops there and just hangs out with Illyrio while Tyrion continues moving on.
Yeah, I think that's certainly possible. All right, so we've got a question in from Mr. Hendricks that is an interesting counterpoint to basically everything we've been saying. You and I like The Children quite a lot. We called this the best finale Game of Thrones has done to date. I would go further and say one of the very best episodes of the series, top 5 for me, probably, if not number 1. I don't think it's number 1, but it's pretty close. Mr. Hendricks writes, while the episode is pretty good, it should have been great. Removing the conversation where Jaime reveals the truth about Tysha, the exclusion of Lady Stoneheart, changing Tyrion's motivation from Tysha to Shae, having Tyrion murder Shae in self-defense rather than in cold blood, removing a few fan-favorite lines, the Jason and the Argonaut skeletons attacking Bran and company, Bloodraven looking like an old wizard dude in a tree rather than an emaciated albino intertwined with the tree, all contributed to this episode not reaching greatness. I am consistently losing confidence in David and Dan, especially after finding out that this is the episode that they nominated for a writing Emmy. Are you two still confident that David and Dan can successfully adapt this fantastic story? Mr. Hendricks not feeling the Game of Thrones right now.
I was, after seeing The Children, it wasn't my favorite episode in terms of writing. I thought it was a strong episode, and I thought there were strong moments, but you're right. I like that this was the only episode they nominated for writing consideration. I think that probably Oathkeeper or The Laws of Gods and Men were better written, even if it was just for the Tyrion trial scene. I am not losing confidence in David and Dan because I know that they know where they're going, and they've said that flat out. I think it was in another Entertainment Weekly interview that this past season they finally had not only conversations about where they're going, but where they're ending it and what that last season will look like. I do think that if you're a book reader fan who can't roll with the punches, it's going to be really hard for you if you're going to nitpick every single change. And you're probably going to ruin the show for yourself, or consider them ruining the show for you. But whereas the first season really was straight from the books. They've said, David and Dan have said as the show goes on that they've realized they need to make it more their own thing, and we're going to see that going forward. And like Josh said earlier, you're going to have an 11-season show if you're going to adapt every single thing, and they're not going to do that. They want it to be tight. They don't want it to get lost along the way like some might argue Martin's books did. So I do still have faith in them, and my boyfriend is one who's a nitpicker and one who every time that I'm like, oh, I heard this about season 5, he gets really upset and frustrated and is like, I don't even want to watch the show anymore. And to me, I'm the opposite. I'm like, okay, like I get why they're doing this, and I rationalize it with myself, and I get excited about the changes. So I just say, just try to enjoy it for being a separate but similar version of a story that we love very much.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that the further along we go on the show, on Game of Thrones, the harder it will be for really serious book purists, because I think those people have already had plenty of issues against the show, and that's only going to get dramatically that's really going to get wildly out of control for people. It's going to get intense. So I do think it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough if you're really, super tied to the books. If you can't separate the two, and if you can't enjoy the show for what it is, I think season 5 really will be a very difficult situation.
And I think going forward, we should all just, even as book club, even as this entire podcast that's based around the idea of comparing the books to the show, I think that we should look at Game of Thrones, the TV show, as being the best TV show it can be instead of the best adaptation it can be. Because if it's the best adaptation it can be, it's still really hindered. I think that we should take David and Dan and the directors and writers to task for stuff like the rape scene that was just poorly done and a mistake on their part, instead of saying, like, oh, well, they didn't include this one line or have this be exactly the same way it's supposed to be, or they changed this to make this easier later, because then you're losing focus on the fact that, like, this is an amazing show and really something that we've never seen before on television. There's never been a fantasy show like Game of Thrones, and not one that's resonated, I think, with as wide an audience. The closest is sci-fi with Battlestar Galactica, from what I can think of, but this really is a first for fantasy, and if Game of Thrones ends up succeeding by the end of season 7, then we could see other fantasy stories that we love get similar respectful treatment. I think
Let's talk about next season a little bit. Let's just do some quick hits.
Okay.
I'm gonna name a character, and you're gonna tell me how they're gonna end season 5.
Oh.
You ready?
All right.
Jon Snow.
Stabbed.
You think we get the stabbing at season 5?
I think we're gonna get to that point. Yeah.
Daenerys.
I think we're gonna go probably past where she is in Dance with Dragons and have her, like, fully meet up with the Dothraki again.
Tyrion.
I think they're going to include the battle at Meereen next season. So
really?
I mean, this is just pure speculation at this point. I haven't thought that far ahead. Either he'll get to Meereen or they'll be past the battle.
Arya.
I don't know. I don't know where she can possibly go next. She's a big question mark for me in the books. I want her to still be away from Westeros, but maybe she'll come back to it by next season.
What about Jaime?
Jaime, I think, will meet up with Brienne.
Okay. And Cersei, do you think we'll get the Walk of Shame, or are they going to hold that for season 6?
No, definitely. I think if we've seen anything about what they're doing in season 5, they're tightening it and getting stuff done because they still have 2 more seasons and there's 2 more books worth of material. They've already done a lot of feast and a lot of dance. I don't think we're going to see them spreading stuff out past when they need to. I think we're going to start seeing them get stuff done.
How about Varys? Do you think Varys kills Kevin Lannister or a Kevin Lannister doppelganger by the end of season 5?
I could see Varys' journey being different in the books or in the show, and him not necessarily doing that assassination, even if he does something else that is the equivalent.
Now the tough ones, because we really have no idea what's going on with them. Littlefinger and Sansa. Yeah, who knows?
Yeah. I know, having sex, like kissing each other, something weird.
Oh, weird.
Maybe she kills him.
What's that?
Maybe she kills him. I'm going to go with Sansa killing Varys.
Wow. Killing Littlefinger?
Killing Littlefinger. And if that's right, and me pulling that out of my ass, then I just want, like, a crown in whatever.
That is actually the one reason why I am bummed. Like, the one big reason why I'm bummed that there doesn't seem like a Lady Stoneheart in the works, because I think my theory in the books is somehow Littlefinger and Lady Stoneheart have to meet, and Lady Stoneheart, like, has to eat his face off or something like that. I feel like that's how Littlefinger has to die. So that's been my theory about how Littlefinger goes in the books. So it certainly won't be that way on the show. But yeah, I don't know. How about Bran? What do you think with Bran? No cold hands, by the way.
I think that there still is a chance for cold hands, if only to reveal him for sure as being Benjen Stark.
Yeah.
Because I think that Benjen Stark will come back in some way. Syrio Forel, I've heard people say they don't expect him to come back. Like, I've heard it both ways, but I think Benjen Stark for sure is going to get a resolution in some manner. So I still am holding out hope for cold hands, and the fact that if they were to reveal him as who he is. It would just be revealing that he's Benjen, and that would give that away. For Bran, I could see him coming into his own as a leader of the Children of the Forest. I think that that is where his story is going. I also think that we could see him, as he comes into his powers, becoming a lot more of a villain. That's my prediction for Bran.
Okay. What about Theon? Where do you think Theon goes?
I think that next season is going to end with Ramsay's wedding. I think that's going to be the big thing in the Stannis clash there.
Yeah, I think that's...
Theon escaping is my answer.
That's a safe bet. All right, I think we covered everything. What do you think, Terri? Is there anything we left out?
I don't think so. I think we still haven't heard anything about the Iron Islands next season.
No.
Balin Greyjoy is still alive. I don't know what they're going to do with that, but that is one loose end that they haven't resolved. Like, Stannis got 2 of his leeches to kill off 2 kings. We still have a 3rd to go, and there's been no casting rumors about Greyjoy stuff. So I told you before, I think that the King's move is going to happen off screen, but
yeah,
that's a big question mark for me. And also what they're going to do about Quentyn. What I heard, again, going back to that rumor about the Trystane and Myrcella, Romeo and Juliet thing, hearing that, my speculation is that Prince Doran is going to decide, no, I'm not going to have Trystane marry Myrcella. I'm going to have him go and marry Dany. And that would essentially do away with Quentyn and combine Trystane and Quentyn. Which, if they're doing that, I'm surprised they just don't name that character Quentyn instead of Trystane. But I could see,
as long as he eats a face full of dragonfire, I'm good with it.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that's where that ends next season as well, or that happens next season.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, then I don't know, Terri. I think we've done it. Book club. I think
we were going to talk about future book clubs. I think.
Yes.
Tell me if you agree with this or not. I would miss all of you all way too much if we, and you Josh as well, if we waited until the beginning of season 5 to start doing more book clubs. There's sure to be plenty of stuff to talk about with casting and various reports, and maybe Winds of Winter will come out and stuff. So I think that we should do this, even if it's like once a month or something like that, once every other month, but still get back together and keep book clubs going between seasons. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. My hope is that there is going to be some new material to talk about soon. I don't know when Winds of Winter is going to come out. I certainly hope that it's before season 5. If it is before season 5, I think that we could do some hardcore book club action. When that book comes out, I think that there's going to be a lot to talk about, and we can definitely do that at a faster pace. But even if it doesn't come out soon, there's always something to talk about with Game of Thrones, and I think a book club a week is a very tall order that I don't know that we could sustain that, but I see no reason why we can't do this once a month. So my goal is I would like to do book club once a month. And if the demand is there to do it more than that, it's not that hard for Terri and I to arrange this. So we're really going to do this based on what you want to do. So what we want to hear from you going forward, if you've made it this far in the podcast, if you want to hear more book club going forward, let us know. Hashtag more book club. That's what we want to hear. So send that our way and tell us what you would like to hear in future episodes and what you would like us to cover. If you want us to do things, based on certain theories and dedicate entire episodes to just a topic, or if you've got questions you want to ask, that is very easy to do. You can tweet them our way. You can send them through the Post-Show Recaps feedback form. That's postshowrecaps.com/feedback. And yeah, we're happy to keep doing this. This is always a highlight of my week since we've started doing this is nerding out about this stuff from the book reader's perspective. I think I speak for Terri and I both saying we've been really flattered by the reaction that we've gotten from people who are listening in and watching on YouTube, listening in the audio archives. It's been a lot of fun for us, and it sounds like it's been a lot of fun for you. So I would love to keep it going. I think once a month sounds reasonable, but if the flow of questions demands it, maybe we can do a little more than that. But at the very least, I think we can do once a month, and we can always cook up some silly topic to talk about on Book Club.
Next month is the perfect one as well, because the Game of Thrones cast will be at Comic-Con. Hopefully we'll be talking them a little bit there, so we might have some more Season 5 scoops for you then.
And I got to imagine Terri is, if you don't know this about Terri by now, Terri is the associate editor of ZapToIt.com. She does all of the cool things over there. She's talking to stars all the time. She's recapping episodes. I'll be at Comic-Con in July. I imagine you're going to be at Comic-Con as well, Terri.
Yes, I will.
And I'm sure, if I might not be doing it, but I am sure that you are going to be at that Game of Thrones panel, or at the very least, you're going to end up talking to someone from Game of Thrones.
That's the goal. I will say, I've never been to a Game of Thrones panel.
Oh, really?
I had to miss it last year. I had someone else go instead for me at Zap 2, which was very heartbreaking because the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. panel was at the same time and they were screening the pilot. So this could be my first Game of Thrones panel that I finally get to go to, and hopefully I can wrangle up a Kit Harington or an Amelia Clark while I'm there.
Well, you're going to talk to somebody, so that's going to happen.
Even if it's a security guard on the side of the road that I'm talking to about Game of Thrones, I'm going to be talking to someone about it.
So I think, the timing right now, it's it's June 27. Comic-Con ends July 27, so I think you can probably count on a Game of Thrones book club podcast sometime either maybe during Comic-Con if you and I are able to meet up for something like that, Terri. We're both going to be very busy, but
in the same room recapping whatever in there.
But we'll certainly be able to do it afterwards. So I think you can expect a Comic-Con Game of Thrones book club, and that might be the next one that we do. But I definitely think that that's in the works. So that sounds good to you. More book club once a month, Terri?
More book club. Always more book club.
All right, and that's it for book club for right now. But there's so much going on post-show recaps. If you are not paying attention, we have an Orange is the New Black podcast with Taylor Cotter and Jessica Leese. They are running through the entire series, and they are recapping season 2, and they're having an awesome time with that. Zach Brooks just did a Girl Meets World podcast. That show is back, the return of Boy Meets World, so that's very fun. This Sunday night, I'm going to be with Antonio Mazzaro. We're going to be recapping the first episode of The Leftovers. I'm not sure if we're going to do that on a weekly basis, but we are at the very least going to be doing the opening episode. That is the new HBO series. It's on at 10 p.m. East Coast time on HBO. So we will be doing that podcast at, I believe, 11:15 p.m. Eastern on Sunday night. It's from Damon Lindelof, is the showrunner. Lost, if you've listened to me on some of these podcasts, you know I'm a big Lost fan. It's my favorite show of all time. So I'm very excited for the return of Damon Lindelof to television. So I'm very excited to talk about all of that. And hopefully it's going to be good, and hopefully you guys are going to be into it, and hopefully we will be doing more of The Leftovers. But even if we don't, we've got 24 is still going strong on Monday nights. Rob and I are going to be recapping the next episode of 24 Live Another Day. This season's been a ton of fun. As a big 24 fan, I'm very pumped up about what we've been doing there. So definitely tune in on Monday if you're a 24 fan. Hear what Rob and I had to say. Rob and I will be back with another show later in the summer. We're going to be talking about The Strain, new crazy Guillermo del Toro vampire show on FX. It's also from a Lost veteran, Carlton Cuse, who was one of the showrunners on Lost. So it's a Lost renaissance going on. And, the 10-year anniversary of the Lost premiere is coming up in September, so I know I definitely want to be doing some special edition Lost coverage on the podcast. So who knows what we're going to do there. Terri, you were a Lost fan, right?
I was a Lost fan, though we have very differing opinions about the finale.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm really interested. I want to pick the brains of people who loved the finale, who didn't love the finale. I'm really curious. So I'm still kind of formulating some thoughts on what to do with Lost this summer. If you've got ideas, please send them my way at Round Howard on Twitter, like Ron Howard but Rounder. I'm very curious to know what you guys are thinking about Lost, if it's in the air, if it's just me. But I'd like to do some special edition podcasts about that. And then we're not done yet. There's so much going on in post-show recaps, and we're not quite done with Game of Thrones. I don't want to tell you exactly what we're up to, but the people have spoken. They want more Game of Thrones here on post-show recaps, and it's been a real blast for me. Rob has had a lot of fun with Game of Thrones. I think that his growth and fandom for the show has been one of the things that I've really enjoyed watching on Game of Thrones Live and during the feedback show. And he's gotten really into it. And him and I are both very excited to do a special little Game of Thrones thing that's going to be coming up in July. The details are going to be coming next week. Not exactly sure when, but it's going to require you, not just you, Terri Schwartz, but the you who is listening right now. It's going to require everybody's help. So we're gonna have a very fun Game of Thrones thing to do coming up. So if you don't want to miss that, you should be subscribed to Post Show Recaps. You can go to postshowrecaps.com/iTunes. Don't miss an episode. There's a ton of cool stuff that's happening on Post Show Recaps right now. The summer tends to be a little bit slower for TV, but we really are just getting started. It's been a really great launch to Post Show Recaps, and we've got so much more fun stuff coming up. And I think that the fall is going to be really cool too. So we're trying to keep things, spicy and entertaining here during the summer, but we're going to come back really strong in the fall as well. With hopefully, I would love to be doing some Marvel talk with you, Terri. So we can.
Yes.
We can talk offline because Terri is a big Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fan, as am I. So we might be able to do something there. So, guys, thank you so much for listening to this very long version of Game of Thrones Book Club. We've been so pumped to have you guys listening week in and week out. Sorry for the delay on this one. Hopefully it was worth it. And we will certainly be back with another book club in at least a month from now, if not sooner. So just let us know what you want to hear. Hashtag more book club. That's what we want to hear from you, and you can tell us what it is you want to listen to on the Game of Thrones Book Club. And Terri, thank you so much. You've taken a lot of time out of your very busy schedule to be doing this podcast, not just today, but all season long. And you're a very good friend of mine, and it has been very exciting to talk to you about Game of Thrones all season long.
You as well. You already said it for me earlier, but this is the highlight of my weekend, and I love doing it, and I love the response that we've gotten from all of you. So that's why we want to keep it up.
Keep it up. All right, so that's going to do it for us. And guys, have a great weekend, have a great week, depending on what time you are listening to this. And thank you again so much, and we will be back as soon as humanly possible. Thank you, guys. We will talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.